Okay, Thomas, thanks again for joining us. Now, let's start by talking about the story. This is a very raw film about two emotionally ravaged brothers who really live at the very bottom of society. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, you say the bottom of society. I would say they dropped out of the bottom of society. It's the lowest as you can get. But I think it's a very, or at least I tried to make a very tender story about two brothers reaching out for each other's throughout life, failing to grab each other's hands, and trying to reach the surface, speaking metaphorically.
Very dark, though, isn't it? You set out to make a dark film.
It's a dark film, but it's still a story of love, I think. Love and tenderness. But yes, dark. We can't get around that.
One thing I couldn't help doing is, even though these brothers, I mean, are very sort of amoral, they live in this very morally skewed universe to do with drugs and violence, you can't help rooting for them and for wanting them to do better and being on their side, really.
Well, hopefully there's an echo from their childhood that makes us understand why they have ended on the dark side of Copenhagen as they have. Also, part of my work and part of what I do is to explore the fragility and the vulnerability of even the most brutal characters. To make a double-sided character is, I guess, a way to create life on screen. So even the most brutal, fat murderers of my movie, I'm trying to find empathy for. And hopefully we succeeded by doing that.
I definitely think that you did. This isn't the first time that you tackle family drama. It's not the first time that you tackle loss and guilt, like in your film Boy Who Walked Backwards. It's the sad tale of a boy who chastises himself for the death of his brother. What interests you about these particular themes and subjects?
Well, the family as an institution has always occupied me. Also in a film that came out here, Festen, some years ago. It's the institution in life, the people in your life that you never choose yourself. It's chosen by faith, I guess, and you can never escape it. And it's a center of a lot of emotional patterns, and it's a very important institution in your life. And I can't help but being curious about this thing all the time.
As well as that, you're interested a lot in the responsibilities we have to our children, like in this film, aren't you? Is that something that comes personally?
Well, yes, I think it's universal to be afraid of failing to your children. You're carrying these little creatures through life and you're afraid of dropping them all the time. But at the time of reading the book that this film is based upon, I had just been through a divorce, and for the first time in my life I was alone with my children, and I had this constant fear of failing as a parent. And I was very, very absorbed in the work of getting my children back on their feet. And I guess that's, you know, the personal, emotional hook that made me do this movie. And, you know, it needs that. It's a struggle to make a movie, and it needs to be important to you personally as well.
When you watch the film as a viewer, you can't help but find it a little bit depressing. I mean, there is some hope, but I'm not going to go into what happens at the end. But you found it a joyful experience, I read, to make this film.
Well, I felt this was a good story, and we all felt that. And I could tell from the crew and the actors that everybody enjoyed their work, even though it was, you know, on a very, very dark side of Copenhagen, a dark side of life. We found that there was a reason to do this, and there was a very strong story behind this, and a sense of hope also. That makes it a joyful experience.
A big theme of addiction as well in this film. Does that come from personal experience working on the film? Is it something? I'm not asking you if you're a drug addict.
No, I wasn't.
But did you work with people who have been affected by drugs to give you some sort of insight how to do the film?
Well, a very good friend of mine, I went to school with, same name as me, Thomas, started shooting heroin instead of shooting movies when we were, you know, in our early 20s. And he's been a drug addict for 20 years, and I called him, and he stopped. Luckily, he stopped 3 years ago, and he helped me a lot because I needed to know all the details, the everyday life of a junkie. You know, how much do you buy? What does it cost? How much does it weigh? How do you shoot it? All that. It had to be very specific and very realistic. And I found it dangerously attractive. Not that I'm attracted to shooting heroin, but there is something very interesting about escaping from real life through different addictions. And I was very fascinated by it, I have to say.
Well, let's talk now a little bit about your career. You were the youngest student ever at the Danish Film School at 19 when you started. You were then nominated for an Oscar with your graduation film, which is something quite remarkable. Then you formed this whole new movement, the Dogma movement, along with Lars von Trier. Then you did the first Dogma film. What was it like to be so successful so quickly?
Terrible. No, seriously. It was, as people say, I know it's a cliche, but it was a blessing and a curse at the same time, because obviously it opened a lot of doors and a lot of possibilities. And I certainly read a lot of American scripts and met a lot of actors from all over the world. But it created a great deal of confusion. And creatively speaking, I am glad to now return to where I started after this explosion on my desk, this explosion of success. It is somewhat confusing to be suddenly exposed to that many people.
Now you've sort of left this Dogma movement behind now, haven't you, after creating it? Why did you do that?
Dogma was meant to be, you know, a riot, a strong reaction against the conventions of filmmaking. And Dogma became a big success all over the world, and I guess became its own convention. It became fashion somehow, and therefore I think suffered a natural, almost death. I for myself could not, having made the success it was with Festen, repeat that. As an artist, there has to be a certain risk connected to what you're doing. And so do another Dogma film right after seemed not natural for me.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're out of time, Thomas, but thanks so much for coming and speaking to us here on France 24.
Thank you very much.
That's it for today's Culture. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, all of our shows are on our website at france24.com. We also have a Facebook page, so please become a fan. I'll see you tomorrow.